and major non-NATO ally status, making it one of only 20 nations on Earth to hold that designation. A nation that fields aging Soviet-era tanks alongside modern Western equipment. A military that spends just $1.2 billion annually on defense, less than the cost of a single American destroyer. There's a nation in East Africa that's quietly become one of the continent's most battle-tested, diplomatically crucial, and strategically positioned military forces on the planet. A nation that's the only country in sub-Saharan Africa to hold a status that puts it in the same league as Israel, Japan, and South Korea. A nation that spent nearly 2 decades fighting one of Africa's deadliest terrorist organizations and actually winning. That nation is Kenya. When you think of Africa's military powerhouses, names like Egypt, South Africa, and Nigeria probably come to mind. How insanely powerful is the Kenya Defense Forces? Let's break it down. On paper, Kenya doesn't look intimidating. According to Global Firepower's 2025 rankings, Kenya sits at number 83 out of 145 countries globally. Respectable, but not exactly terrifying. In Africa, it ranks 11th. The Kenya Defense Forces have only about 24,000 active personnel. That's smaller than Uganda's 45,000 troops and absolutely dwarfed by Nigeria's 143,000 or Egypt's 450,000. Yet this same country just received Israeli Spider air defense systems, American stealth helicopters, and major non-NATO ally status, making it one of only 20 nations on Earth to hold that designation. A force that spent 18 years fighting one of Africa's deadliest terrorist organizations in Somalia, and hasn't just survived, it's winning. So could this East African nation actually defend itself against a serious invasion? The answer isn't found in tank counts or defense budgets. It's found in geography, alliances, and the brutal lessons learned from nearly 2 decades of continuous combat. Welcome to the defensive reality of modern-day Kenya. Look at a map. The country is surrounded by some of the most difficult terrain in East Africa. To the north lies the vast Chalbi Desert and arid plains covering over 100,000 square kilometers, receiving less than 250 millimeters of rainfall annually. Any invasion force from Ethiopia or South Sudan would cross hundreds of miles of waterless wasteland where temperatures exceed 50 degrees Celsius. The eastern border with Somalia is dominated by the Great Rift Valley escarpments and semi-arid bushlands. The Tana River, over 1,000 kilometers long, creates a natural barrier, while the terrain consists of thick bush perfect for ambushes and asymmetric warfare. After 18 years fighting al-Shabaab in Somalia, the Kenya Defense Forces know this terrain intimately. To the west, Lake Victoria and the highlands create natural obstacles. Mount Kenya, Africa's second highest peak at 5,199 meters, and the Aberdare Range dominate the Central Highlands, where most of the population lives. These mountains funnel any invasion force into predictable routes that can be defended with limited troops. Soldiers have been fighting actual battles, conducting real raids, surviving IED attacks, and adapting to asymmetric warfare tactics that most Western militaries only theorize about. According to military analysts, this operational experience is what separates Kenya from its regional competitors. Experience you can't buy. Experience you can't simulate. Experience that only comes from 18 years of continuous combat operations. In June 2024, something historic happened. US President Joe Biden designated Kenya as a major non-NATO ally, making it the first country in sub-Saharan Africa to receive this status. Only 20 nations on Earth hold this designation. Countries like Israel, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and now Kenya. What does this mean? Everything. Major non-NATO ally status gives Kenya access to advanced US military equipment that most countries can only dream about. We're talking cutting-edge defense technology, surplus military gear, priority access to weapons systems, and participation in joint research and development programs. In practical terms, the US recently committed to delivering 16 military helicopters, 8 UH-1 Hueys, and 8 MD-500s, plus approximately 150 M117 armored security vehicles to Kenya. These aren't hand-me-downs. These are battle-tested platforms that can change the game for regional security operation. But it's not just about hardware. The designation means Kenya gets access to U.S. military training programs, joint exercises like Justified Accord, the largest U.S. Africa Command exercise in East Africa, and intelligence sharing arrangements that most nations would pay billions to access. According to military geographers, roughly 60% of the country is arid or semi-arid land unsuitable for large-scale mechanized warfare. The southwestern highlands, where 95% of economic activity occurs, are accessible only through a limited number of approach routes that can be heavily defended. This isn't Egypt's Sahara or Australia's isolation, but it's difficult enough that any invasion force would face severe logistical challenges before encountering the actual military. The Kenya Defense Forces field approximately 24,000 active personnel backed by 2,500 reserves. That's tiny compared to regional rivals. Ethiopia fields 162,000 troops. Uganda operates 45,000. But numbers don't tell the full story. In December 2025, the nation received Israeli Spider surface-to-air missile systems worth $26 million. Mobile platforms capable of intercepting aircraft, helicopters, drones, and precision munitions at ranges up to 40 kilometers. This addresses the primary vulnerability: air defense. Previous gaps in coverage left critical infrastructure exposed to aerial threats. The $236 million Modernization initiative announced in 2024 allocates $45 million annually for tactical vehicles, surveillance drones, mine-resistant vehicles, and modern defense technology. Recent acquisitions include Turkish armored personnel carriers, American UH-1 Huey helicopters, and approximately 150 M117 armored security vehicles delivered under the major non-NATO ally framework. The Kenya Navy operates as the best-equipped naval force in immediate East Africa, focused on protecting 536 kilometers of Indian Ocean coastline and counter-piracy operations. The Kenya Air Force fields transport aircraft, helicopters, and a limited number of combat jets, modest but adequate for defensive operations. According to defense analysts, the force isn't built for offensive operations or regional conquest. It's optimized for exactly one mission: defending the highlands and economic heartland against invasion while maintaining border security. Here's where defensive calculations fundamentally change. In June 2024, the United States designated the nation as a major non-NATO ally, the first sub-Saharan African country to receive this status. This isn't symbolic. This means priority access to advanced U.S. military equipment, joint training exercises, intelligence sharing, and participation in defense research programs. The British Army Training Unit Kenya, one of the UK's most important overseas facilities, has operated in the country for decades. When Western powers need a stable, reliable partner for operations in the Horn of Africa, they turn to this East African nation. The US maintains Camp Simba at Manda Bay, used for counterterrorism operations across the region. Joint exercises like Justified Accord, the largest U.S. Africa Command exercise in East Africa, ensure interoperability between forces. According to Georgetown University's analysis, any significant invasion would trigger immediate international response. U.S. and U.K. intelligence assets would provide real-time battlefield surveillance. Western air power could establish air superiority within hours. Naval forces could secure the Indian Ocean coastline. The calculation for any potential aggressor becomes, are we willing to fight not just the Kenya Defense Forces, but their Western allies with overwhelming technological superiority? Since 2011, forces have been engaged in sustained combat operations in Somalia under African Union missions. Kenya's military isn't just getting stronger, it's getting plugged into the most advanced military network on the planet. In 2024, the Kenyan government announced something that sent shockwaves through East African military circles: a $236 million military modernization initiative spread over 5 years. That's $45 million per year dedicated exclusively to acquiring tactical vehicles, surveillance drones, mine-resistant vehicles, and modern defense technology. For context, that might not sound like much compared to Saudi Arabia's $70 billion defense budget. But remember, Kenya's GDP is a fraction of Saudi Arabia's, and this investment is laser-focused on exactly what Kenya needs: counterterrorism capabilities, border surveillance, and rapid response systems. The first acquisitions are already hitting the ground. DCD Protected Mobility Springbok armored personnel carriers from South Africa, Max Pro mine-resistant vehicles from the United States, advanced surveillance drones for monitoring Kenya's 3,400-kilometer coastline and northern borders plagued by bandits and terrorist infiltration. 25. Kenya contributes 1,410 troops working alongside forces from Uganda, Ethiopia, Djibouti, and Egypt to stabilize Somalia and degrade al-Shabaab's capabilities. These aren't ceremonial deployments. Kenyan soldiers have been in firefights, survived complex ambushes, conducted joint operations with U.S. Special Forces, and learned counterinsurgency tactics in real time against an enemy that's been fighting for nearly 20 years. Kenya sits at one of the most strategic locations on the African continent, bordering Somalia, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Uganda, and Tanzania, with 536 kilometers of Indian Ocean coastline. This makes Kenya the anchor of East African security. Kenya hosts the British Army Training Unit Kenya, one of the UK's most important overseas training facilities. The US maintains a significant military presence at Camp Simba in Manda Bay, used for counterterrorism operations across the region. When Western powers need a stable, reliable partner for operations in the Horn of Africa, they turn to Kenya. Kenya's navy, though small, is considered the best equipped in immediate East Africa, focused on counter-piracy, maritime security, and protecting critical shipping lanes through which 30% of the world's oil passes. President William Ruto has made naval modernization a priority, stating Kenya's goal is to maintain a high state of readiness to respond swiftly and effectively to an increasingly dynamic security environment. But here's where things get complicated. In April 2025, President Ruto visited China and declared that Kenya and China are co-architects of a new world order, one that is fair, inclusive, and sustainable. This statement sent shockwaves through Washington. U.S. Senator Jim Risch, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, called the remarks questionable and warned that relying on leaders who embrace Beijing so openly is an error. An amendment was introduced requiring a full review of Kenya's major non-NATO ally status, with a classified report due to Congress within 180 days. Kenya is now walking a tightrope, maintaining its partnership with the United States while also deepening economic and infrastructure ties with China. This balancing act could either position Kenya as a genuinely independent power broker in African geopolitics, or it could jeopardize the Western military cooperation that's been fueling Kenya's modernization. Here's the bottom line. Kenya's military isn't powerful because it has the most tanks or the biggest navy. It's powerful because it's battle-tested, strategically positioned, diplomatically connected, and rapidly modernizing. With 18 years of combat experience in Somalia, major non-NATO ally status with the United States, $236 million in modernization funding, and partnerships spanning from Washington to London to Ankara, Kenya has positioned itself as East Africa's indispensable military power. When al-Shabaab needs to be fought, when piracy needs to be countered, when regional stability needs to be maintained, Kenya is the force that gets called. But the real test isn't happening on battlefields. It's happening in diplomatic corridors, as Kenya tries to navigate between Western and Chinese influence without losing the military partnerships that have made it powerful in the first place. If Kenya pulls off this balancing act, it won't just be insanely powerful for an African military, it could become one of the most strategically valuable militaries in the world. So what do you think? Can Kenya maintain its partnerships with both the West and China? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into Africa's rising military powers, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next breakdown. Thanks for watching.